Your house smells like old people. You're just a burden to everyone." Sophia's words clawed at my mind, her face a mask of pure rage. Before I could even process it, something warm and wet splattered across my cheek. My own granddaughter, the same girl I'd cradled in my arms countless nights, had just spit in my face. I froze, the saliva a slow, sickening trickle down my wrinkled cheek. Tears sprang instantly, but I bit back the sob. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. My hands trembling, I grabbed a napkin from the table, wiping my face in silence. "Useless old woman," she spat, her eyes raking over me as if I were refuse. Sophia, my 16-year-old granddaughter, stood in my kitchen. The very kitchen where I'd taught her to bake cookies when she barely reached the counter. Her eyes, once so sweet, now burned with contempt. The latest model phone in her hand probably cost more than my entire living room furniture. I took a ragged breath, trying to still the tremor shaking my body. 67 years on this earth, and I'd never known such a sharp, gut-wrenching pain. "Please, get out of my way," I murmured, forcing myself past her, into my bedroom. I closed the door, collapsing onto the bed. The tears finally came, hot and unrestrained. How had we come to this? What had I done wrong? You must be wondering how a grandmother and her granddaughter could reach such a desolate place of disrespect. How someone you cradled in your arms, taught their first words, and loved without condition, could transform into a vessel of such cruelty. Let me rewind a little. Explain how it all began. My name is Brenda, and I'm 67 years old. My life was never meant to be easy, it seemed. I lost Arthur, my husband, when our 3 children were still small. Suddenly, I was alone, working 2 jobs just to keep a roof over our heads, cleaning houses by day, sewing by night. My calloused hands, silent witnesses to every sacrifice. Kevin, my middle son, was always the sensitive one. When he met Stephanie, a girl from a far more affluent family, I worried. Not out of prejudice, but a quiet fear that their worlds would inevitably clash. Still, when they decided to marry, I offered them the plot of land right behind my own house to build on. It was all I had. "Mom, you don't have to," Kevin said, his face flushed with embarrassment. "Honey, I want you close. This land is the only thing your father and I ever managed to save. He'd be happy knowing it's helping our family grow." Stephanie accepted with a polite smile, but I saw the flicker in her eyes. Grander dreams than a simple house behind her mother-in-law's. Still, they built there. A house far bigger and more modern than mine, I might add. When Sophia was born, it was as if the sun had returned to my life. That little rose-cheeked baby brought a fresh purpose to my days. With Kevin and Stephanie both working, I offered to care for my granddaughter. It would be a favor to me, I told them, a quiet plea. My house gets so quiet. And so, our routine began. Every morning, Stephanie would bring a sleepy Sophia to my door. I'd prepare bottles, change diapers, sing the old lullabies I'd learned from my own grandmother. Her first steps were taken clinging to my hands. Her first word? Grandma. The years blurred by and Sophia grew, a living extension of my heart. Afternoons after school, we'd make cookies together. I'd tell her stories of her grandpa Arthur, who she never knew, of a life long past. "Grandma, tell me again," she'd beg, eyes wide, "how you played without phones. Fascinated by a world without technology." Kevin and Stephanie prospered. He rose to a high-ranking position at a multinational. She opened a boutique at the mall. Their house, right behind mine, quickly felt too small for their burgeoning lifestyle. They renovated, expanded, even added a pool. Every visit, new furniture appeared, an imported appliance, something I barely knew how to operate. It was around Sophia's 12th birthday that I started seeing the shifts. She came less often. When she did, she was glued to her phone. My stories no longer held her interest. My homemade cookies were dismissed. Too much fat. "Grandma, why don't you renovate this house?" she remarked one day, sweeping her gaze over my worn furniture with disdain. "Everything's so old." "Honey, these pieces have history. Your grandpa Arthur and I bought them with great sacrifice. Besides, why change? I'm comfortable." She rolled her eyes, a gesture that would soon become her signature. Stephanie only made it worse. She always made a point of detailing their international trips, the designer clothes for Sophia, the new imported car. Not that I cared about any of it. I was genuinely happy for their success. But I saw how those comments carved a deeper chasm between my simple world and the opulence Sophia was becoming accustomed to. For Sophia's 15th birthday, Stephanie threw an extravagant party at a grand event hall. Hundreds of guests, wedding-worthy decor, an imported dress. I went, of course, but I felt like an alien. Sophia's friends gazed at me like I was a museum relic. My gift, a necklace that belonged to my mother, her great-grandmother, was met with a mechanical, "Thank you," and quickly vanished into the back of a gift drawer. That night, I went home, a lead weight in my chest. Something was breaking, and I had no idea how to mend it. Last Christmas was a brutal one. As always, I'd prepared dinner for the whole family. I'd spent days cooking all the traditional dishes: roasted turkey, cornbread stuffing, sweet potato casserole, and that special bread pudding Sophia used to devour as a child. When I served dessert, she wrinkled her nose. "Grandma," she announced, loud enough for everyone. "Nobody eats that sugary junk anymore. Don't you know how bad that is for you?" I smiled, a thin, brittle thing, pretending the comment hadn't pierced me. "Just a little bit won't hurt, sweetie." "Yes, it will. And then you old people end up with diabetes and all these medical problems, becoming a burden on everyone." Kevin finally interjected, his voice tight. "Sophia, respect your grandmother." But the damage was already done. The ensuing silence was thick, broken only by the uneasy clinking of silverware. And then, just last week, Kevin called, asking if I could watch Sophia for a few hours while he and Stephanie handled some bank affairs. "Of course, honey. Bring her over. I'll make those savory cheese muffins she used to love." The doorbell chimed. I opened it with a hopeful smile. Sophia walked in, not a word, face buried in her phone screen. "Hi, my love. So good to see you. Come on, I made us a snack." She shuffled into the kitchen. I tried to make conversation. School, friends, what she was watching. Only grunts and monosyllables answered me. I placed the savory cheese muffins on the table, still warm, giving off that irresistible aroma that used to make her race to the kitchen. "Grandma, don't you have anything decent in this house? Just this peasant food?" she blurted, her gaze dripping with disgust as it landed on my offering. It felt like a physical blow, but I held my composure. "Honey, it's what I could manage. If you'd prefer, I can make something else." That's when the dam broke. She shot up, knocking her chair clattering. "Don't you dare call me sweetie!" she shrieked. "You're just a useless old woman who knows nothing. I don't know why my parents even force me to come here." And then, the spit, a warm, wet glob, right in my face, followed by words that would be seared into my memory. Your house smells like old people. You're just a burden to everyone. Hours later, after I'd cried myself dry in my room, the doorbell chimed. It was Kevin, coming for Sophia. I hastily wiped my swollen eyes, then went to the door. "Mom, is everything all right?" he asked, his gaze lingering on my red-rimmed eyes. Before I could answer, Sophia materialized behind me. "Dad, thank goodness you're here," she wailed. "Grandma was so mean to me. She said I was rude, and that you guys don't know how to raise me right." I stared at her, utterly incredulous. Not only had she disrespected me in the cruelest way imaginable, but now she was lying through her teeth. "Is that true, Mom?" Kevin asked, his brow furrowed with confusion. In that moment, something inside me irrevocably snapped. My own son, whom I'd raised with such profound love, was doubting me. "No, honey, that's not true. But I think it's best you both leave now. I'm just tired." I closed the door and returned to my room, where I spent the night wide awake, a relentless reel of my life playing behind my eyes. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night spent working, every hard-earned cent saved to build, my children, a better future. And for what? To be treated like trash in my own home? It was during that endless night that I forged my decision. A decision that would change everything, not just for them, but most importantly, for me. The next morning, I called Kevin. "Kevin, I need you, Stephanie, and Sophia to come over this afternoon. We have some important matters to discuss." "Is everything all right, Mom?" "Yes, honey, something has happened. I prefer to discuss it in person." I hung up and began my preparations. First, I called my sister, Betty, who lived in a quaint beach town a few hours' drive away. "Betty, remember your invitation for me to move down there? Is it still standing?" "Of course, sis. There's a perfect little apartment for sale right in my building, directly across from the ocean. You'd adore it." Next, I called Paul, my lawyer, who'd handled my meager legal affairs for years. "Brenda, are you certain about this? It's a very serious decision." "I am, Paul. More certain than I've ever been about anything in my life." At 4 that afternoon, the doorbell chimed again. I opened the door to find Kevin, Stephanie, and Sophia standing there. My granddaughter carefully avoided my gaze. "Please, come in. Have a seat." They settled onto my worn sofa, radiating discomfort. Stephanie's eyes flickered around, as if she were in some dusty museum. Sophia remained glued to her phone. "Yesterday, something happened that gave me much to reflect on," I began, my voice steady despite the frantic beat of my heart. "Sophia treated me in a way no human being deserves, much less a member of their own family." Stephanie stiffened on the couch, already bristling to defend her daughter. "Brenda, children sometimes..." I raised a hand, cutting her off. "I'm not finished. For years, I sacrificed everything for you all. I gave you the very land your house sits on. I practically raised Sophia from a baby so you both could pursue your careers. And I never asked for anything in return, save for respect. But yesterday, I realized that time is over." From my pocket, I produced the documents Paul had given me earlier. "This is the sales contract for my house. I've decided to move closer to my sister Betty, down by the coast. With the money, I'll live comfortably and finally fulfill some dreams I've deferred for decades." Their faces blanched with shock, but I still wasn't finished. "And as for the land your house is built on, which remains in my name, I'm donating it to a charity that cares for abandoned seniors." The silence that followed was absolute, suffocating. Sophia, for the very first time, seemed utterly speechless, her phone lying forgotten in her lap. Kevin was the first to react. "Mom, you can't do this. Our house. We built it there, invested everything we had." "I can, and I will, Kevin. The land is in my name. It was a gift I gave, and gifts, when met with ingratitude, can be reclaimed." Stephanie surged to her feet, her face a mask of furious red. "This is absurd. You can't just evict us. We have rights." "Your lawyers can confer with mine," I replied calmly. "You have 6 months to organize yourselves." Then I turned to Sophia, who at last met my gaze. There was fear there, perhaps even a nascent glimmer of regret. "And Sophia," I said, my voice unwavering, "I hope one day you understand that respect isn't demanded. It's earned. And that old age isn't a disease. It's a privilege many don't get to experience." Kevin tried to argue more, to list everything they'd supposedly done for me, how they'd always been present. Stephanie threatened lawsuits. Sophia remained utterly silent, a solitary tear carving a path down her carefully made-up face. But my decision was absolute. After a lifetime of putting others first, it was time to put myself first. When they finally left, I closed the door, a strange mix of pain and profound relief washing over me. It hurt to acknowledge I'd reached this point with my own family. Yet, at the same time, a colossal weight had lifted from my shoulders. I looked at Arthur's photo on the shelf. That old portrait where he smiled, our small children cradled in his arms. "Did I do the right thing, old man?" I whispered to the photo. The silence of the empty house was my only answer. But deep down I already knew. For the first time in decades, I had chosen myself. And that, as sharp as the pain was just the beginning of a new journey. What I didn't yet know was that this decision would ripple through their lives, and mine most of all. A turn of events none of us, especially Sophia, could have ever imagined. That night, after they'd gone, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the starry sky. Lights blazed in Kevin and Stephanie's house, and I could hear raised voices, no doubt, arguing about my decision. Part of me ached, a deep, tearing pain as if I'd ripped a piece from my own heart. But another part, a part I barely recognized, felt strangely light. I remembered a conversation with Arthur, just before he passed. We'd been sitting on this very porch, his hands already frail from illness, holding mine. "Brenda," he'd whispered, his voice raspy with illness. "Promise me you'll live your life after I'm gone. Don't just exist for others." "What do you mean, Arthur? The children need me." He squeezed my hand with the scant strength he had left. "The children will grow up, build their own lives. And you deserve more than just being a mother or a grandmother. You are Brenda, first and foremost." At the time, I'd nodded, but his meaning had eluded me. Now, almost 3 decades later, his words finally resonated. 2 weeks elapsed since the confrontation. I began organizing the move, sorting what to take, what to leave behind. Each object held memories, some sweet, others now tainted by recent bitterness. I was packing books when the doorbell chimed. Opening the door, I found Sophia standing alone. Her eyes were red and puffy, as if she'd been crying for hours. She wore no makeup, dressed in simple clothes, a stark contrast to the arrogant teenager who'd spat in my face. "Can I come in, Grandma?" she asked, her voice small, almost childlike, echoing the little girl who used to race into my arms. I hesitated, my wounded pride still throbbing. But then I stepped aside, granting her entry. She looked around, her gaze lingering on the stacked boxes. "You're really leaving?" she murmured, almost to herself. "Yes," I replied simply. We stood in silence, the weight of unspoken words a palpable presence between us. Finally, Sophia took a shaky breath and faced me. "I came to apologize," she said, her voice fragile, "for what I did, for what I said. It was horrible, unforgivable." I crossed my arms, a shield. "Why are you apologizing now, Sophia? Because I'm selling the house and donating the land?" She shook her head, tears already spilling. "No, I mean, at first. Maybe when you announced you were donating the land, Kevin and Stephanie went crazy. They started fighting, Stephanie blaming Kevin for not having put the deed in their names sooner." Sophia sank onto the sofa, looking suddenly drained. "But then, that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing your face when I..." She choked, unable to complete the sentence, sobbing. I remained firm, though my grandmother's heart ached to pull her close, to tell her everything would be okay. But that would have been a lie. Some wounds cut too deep. "I started remembering everything," she continued, wiping new tears. "How you taught me to bake cookies, how you'd hold my hand when I was afraid of the dark, the stories you told me about Grandpa Arthur." Sophia opened her bag and produced something, an old worn notebook I recognized instantly. It was the recipe album we'd made together when she was about 8. "I found this at the bottom of my drawer," she said softly. "Remember when we made it? You'd paste in the recipes and I'd decorate them with drawings." I took the notebook, flipping through the yellowed pages. Our favorite recipes were there, illustrated with vibrant, childish drawings. One page read, "Grandma Brenda's and Sophia's cookies," with hearts drawn around it. "I remember," I replied, my voice now softened. "You said that when you grew up, you were going to open a bakery and use all these recipes." She offered a sad smile. "Yeah, before I decided that homemade food was for poor people." The silence descended again, heavier this time. Finally, I asked the question that truly gnawed at me. "What happened to you, Sophia? How did we get to this point?" She sighed deeply, her face suddenly etched with a weariness far beyond her 16 years. "I don't know exactly. I guess it just happened. Gradually. At school, my friends, they're all really rich, you know? Not like us, who only got money recently." "And that bothered you?" "At first, yeah. They talk about international trips, beach houses, their parents' fancy cars. I'd lie, say I had all that too. When Stephanie started earning more and we could actually afford some of those things, it was like I needed to constantly prove I wasn't inferior anymore. And I represented that inferiority to you," I concluded, my voice flat. Sophia lowered her gaze, shame flooding her face. "I guess so. You reminded me where we came from, that we weren't born with a silver spoon, like they said. And Stephanie always said." She stopped abruptly, as if she'd revealed too much. "What did Stephanie say, Sophia?" She hesitated, biting her lip. "Stephanie always commented on how hard it was to have a mother-in-law who lived on the last century. How embarrassing it was to bring her friends over and see the simple house, the old furniture. She said you refused to evolve, that you were just stubborn. That stung, but it didn't surprise me. I'd always known Stephanie was ashamed of my simplicity. Once," Sophia continued, "when I was about 13, I brought a friend here. You'd made us warm apple pie and served it with those old chipped floral teacups. Afterwards, at school, she told everyone my grandma looked like hired help and that our house was a poverty museum. Everyone laughed. I remembered that day vividly. Sophia had rushed off, barely touching the pie I'd made, especially for her friend and her. At the time, I dismissed it as teenage impatience. "Why did you never tell me that?" She shrugged. I was embarrassed, I guess. And then, I started to believe them. That you were outdated. That our family had evolved, but you hadn't. I stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the backyard where Sophia used to play. So many layers of hurt, so many misunderstandings. You know what's ironic, Sophia? I could have renovated this house years ago. I have savings. I'm not as broke as you all seem to think. But these pieces of furniture, these walls, they tell the story of my life with your Grandpa Arthur, with your parents. Every scratch on this table has a story. Every worn spot on this sofa represents a moment we lived. I turned to face her. But I understand that for your generation, none of that holds meaning. You live in a world of disposables, of new, of shiny. And that's fine. You just didn't have the right to humiliate me for my choices. Sophia stood and walked towards me, her eyes glistening. I know that now. After you announced you were leaving, I started thinking about everything you've done for us. How you looked after me when I was small. How you helped Kevin and Stephanie. I asked Dad about the lot, and he told me you bought it with Grandpa Arthur's settlement money when he passed. That it was all you had. Yes, your Grandpa Arthur worked 25 years at the plant. When he died, I used his settlement money to buy this land. It was our dream to have our own home. And you gave half of it to Kevin and Stephanie, she concluded, understanding finally dawning in her eyes. I did it because I wanted you all close. Because family was everything to me. Was? She asked, picking up on the tense I'd used. I sighed deeply. It still is, Sophia. But I've learned that love without respect isn't true love. It's servitude. And I served this family for too long, utterly forgetting myself in the process. Sophia lowered her head, tears now falling freely. I understand if you can't forgive me. What I did was unforgivable. I looked at my granddaughter, not the arrogant teenager who'd humiliated me, but the little girl I'd cradled in my arms, who'd filled my life with joy for so many years. Forgiveness is a process, Sophia. It doesn't happen overnight. But I'm willing to try, if you're truly sorry and willing to change. She nodded vigorously. I am, Grandma. I promise I am. Then this is the first step, but my decision to move stands. I need this fresh start. Can I visit you there? She asked, hesitant. You can, but with conditions. Respect is the first. Sophia nodded again, wiping away new tears. Can I hug you? I opened my arms and she flung herself into them, sobbing like the little girl who used to run to my lap when she was hurt. I felt my own tears stream down as I hugged her back. It wouldn't be easy. Trust, once shattered, is agonizing to rebuild. But maybe, just maybe, we could forge a new path. 3 months passed since that day. The move to the coast happened precisely as planned. I sold my house for a good price. Better than I'd even expected, actually. The buyers were a young couple who fell in love with the sprawling backyard and the fruit trees Arthur and I planted decades ago. As for the land where Kevin and Stephanie built, I kept my word. I donated it to a charity caring for needy seniors, but with a condition. They could continue living there by paying a symbolic rent directly to the institution. It was a compromise I found. I didn't want to fully displace them, but I also wouldn't allow them to continue taking my generosity for granted. Kevin accepted the agreement, though Stephanie was furious. I heard from Sophia that they'd been fighting constantly, Stephanie blaming Kevin for not securing the property. Apparently, the facade of their perfect marriage was cracking under financial pressure and wounded pride. My beachfront apartment is small, but intensely cozy. From the balcony, I can see the ocean, a luxury I'd never dared to imagine. Mornings, I walk along the beach, feeling the sand beneath my toes and the sun on my face. Afternoons, I join the local library's book club or painting classes at the community center. I've made new friends, kindred spirits my age, with stories echoing my own. Widows who'd rebuilt their lives, grandmothers who'd learned to set boundaries with their families. With them, I discovered my story was far from unique. That many women of my generation spent their entire lives caring for others, forgetting themselves in the process. Betty, my sister, lives in the same building, and we have dinner together almost every night. We laugh recalling our childhoods, shed tears talking about those we've lost, and marvel at how life comes full circle. "You're different, Brenda," she told me the other day. "Lighter, more alive." And she's right. I feel more alive now, at 67, than I have in decades, as if I finally have permission to exist for myself. Not just as someone's mother, grandmother, or widow. Sophia has been keeping her promise of change. She visits me once a month, usually on Sundays. At first, the visits were tense, filled with superficial conversations and stretched silences. But little by little, we're rebuilding our relationship. Not as it was, but something new, rooted in mutual respect. On her last visit, she brought a new notebook. "To replace the old one," she explained, a small smile playing on her lips. I thought we could create new recipes together. We spent the afternoon in the kitchen, experimenting with a cookie recipe using local ingredients. She told me she'd started working part-time at a bakery near home. The owner's teaching me new techniques, but she said my cinnamon cookies are the best she's ever tasted. I told her the recipe was yours. I smiled, a familiar warmth spreading through my chest. Yours too. We created it together, remember? She nodded, her eyes bright with a nascent understanding. I remember everything now, Grandma. It's like I woke up from a nightmare where I was a horrible person. You're not a horrible person, Sophia. Just a teenager who lost her way for a while. The important thing is, you're finding your way back. Later, walking along the beach, she confessed her parents were having serious marital problems. Kevin found out Stephanie was spending way more than they could afford. They're in deep debt, you know. All that luxury living was financed by borrowed money. I wasn't surprised. I'd always suspected Stephanie's ostentatious lifestyle was unsustainable. "And how are you coping with that?" I asked, concerned about the impact a potential divorce would have on her. Sophia shrugged. "It's weird, but not as bad as I thought. I guess I'd always sensed something wasn't right. They barely talk, you know. Just argue about money and status." We stopped to watch the sunset, waves breaking softly on the sand. "Grandma," she said suddenly, "thank you for not giving up on me, even when I was so cruel." I took her hand, squeezing it gently. "True family doesn't give up, Sophia. You might step back when necessary. You might set boundaries, but you don't give up." She smiled, and in that smile I saw a glimpse of the little girl who used to race around my backyard, chasing butterflies. Last week, I received an unexpected call from Kevin. His voice sounded tired, utterly defeated. "Mom, I need to tell you something. Stephanie and I are separating." "I'm sorry, son," I replied sincerely. "Don't be. I think it was past time. We'd been living a lie for years, trying to maintain appearances at all costs." He paused. "Honestly, I think your decision to move was what finally made us face reality. Without the guaranteed land, without you to pick up all the pieces while we pretended to be something we weren't, everything just crumbled. And how you doing?" Strangely, better than expected, as if a tremendous weight has lifted off my shoulders. I'm looking for a smaller apartment, something I can actually afford. We talked for almost an hour. For the first time in years, Kevin spoke openly about his feelings, his fears, his regrets. He told me how he'd let himself be swept away by Stephanie's ambition, how he'd strayed from his own values trying to please her. "You were always my example, Mom, of strength, of integrity. And I lost myself trying to be someone I'm not. It's never too late to find your way back, son." That's what Sophia told me. He chuckled softly. "She's different, you know? More mature, kinder. She said she learned it from you." When we hung up, I sat for a long moment, thinking about how life truly comes full circle. How my decision to finally prioritize myself had created ripples that affected the whole family. Some painful, others profoundly necessary. Yesterday, organizing some old photos, I found one I'd taken with Arthur just before he got sick. We were at the beach, smiling, the ocean stretching endlessly behind us. Not so different from the view I have now from my balcony. "I did it, old man," I murmured to the photo. "It took a while, but I'm finally living, not just existing." This morning, I woke to the sound of waves, the sun streaming through my window. I prepared my coffee and settled onto the balcony to soak in the view. My cell phone rang. It was Sophia, confirming her visit for next Sunday. She said she was bringing a friend from the bakery who wanted to learn my recipes. The life I have now isn't perfect. I still miss my old house sometimes. I still worry about my children and grandchildren. But for the first time, I feel like I'm truly living on my own terms. That I have value not just for what I do for others, but for who I am. The revelation Sophia hadn't expected wasn't just the sale of the house or the donation of the land. It was seeing her grandmother, a woman she'd dismissed as a useless old lady, reborn at 67, discovering new interests, forging new friendships, building a full and meaningful life. And perhaps that was the most important lesson I could ever hope to pass on to her. It's never too late to start over. Never too late to demand the respect you deserve. And never, ever too late to truly grasp that before you're a mom, a grandma, or a wife, you are a whole, complete person, utterly worthy of love and respect, especially your own. I look out at the horizon now, where the sky just melts into the sea, and I can't help but smile. Life still has so much waiting for me, and for the first time in a long time, I'm truly ready to embrace it.